From a childhood interest in the underwater world, Kramer Wimberley has carved a career to restore our oceans and preserve our heritage, the tagline of the organization he represents, Diving with a Purpose. Black stories must be woven into the fabric of the environmental movement, which he recounts as he uncovers and expands knowledge of transatlantic slave trade by locating and exploring sunken slave ships hidden underwater for hundreds of years. With travel to 35 countries as a scuba diver, master instructor, and researcher, Kramer teaches scuba diving to people of all ages, helps to restore coral reefs in Florida and beyond, works with government research agencies, and has been acknowledged by numerous organizations and associations. Learn more about this talented and committed professional who also holds academic credentials in criminal justice and a law degree.
Kramer Wimberley is our guest. He is on the board of directors of a wonderful nonprofit called Diving with a Purpose. It is recognized as this year's one of the top 10 nonprofits making a difference by helping to clean up our environment, and in this case, save our coral, save our ocean, and a number of other programs that they have helping young people be able to become divers. They have a program that is a 5-year program educating people all about diving and mapping and all of those kinds of things. So we're happy to have Kramer Wimberley. And Kramer, let's start from the beginning. Where did you grow up? Where did you go to school? And what were the first jobs that you took?
Wow. Right. From the beginning, know that during the course of the interview, my stories tend to be a bit long and winding. So if I be too long and winding, just reel me back in.
Okay.
I was born in Boston, Massachusetts, but I grew up in Newark, New Jersey. I went to the public school system, and then from there, I started engineering and electrical training as an electrical engineer at New Jersey Institute of Technology. And I left school and started working with the Newark Fire Department.
Well, that's a switch.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, it was a distraction.
Okay.
Right? Because I got distracted in school, and they said, it's probably time for you to take a little break for a little while to get your priorities in order. Right. So I took a break, started working, and then went back to school about five or 6 years later to complete my undergraduate degree and then go on to law school.
Wow.
Yes.
Well, you got your act together, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
And
right.
So you went to law school.
Mm-hmm.
Did you get your law degree?
Yes, I did.
You did. And what kind of lawyer did you
Criminal
become?
defense.
Criminal. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Did you practice it?
For a brief period of time, right? Because I was still working as a firefighter.
Uh-huh.
So the natural progression for me was I could not open up a private practice while I was still working, and clerking for a judge meant that you could not do anything other than clerk for a judge. So I had offers to do that, but it was easy for me to just move from the fire department in the city to the law department in the city.
Interesting. So when you were growing up as a little boy, what did you want to become a fireman?
No, I had no idea at all. I had a mentor, right, who was my dentist. Right. When I remember sitting in his dental chair at 12 years old, and he's working in my mouth, asking me, okay, so what are you doing with your life? Like, Doc, I'm 12. He said, that's not an excuse. Right? You have to put a plan in place. He said, when I was a young man, I could say I'm 12 years old, but times are changing, and you need to know exactly what direction that you're headed in and what your plans are. Now, otherwise it'll be too late. So every time I went back to the dentist, I'm sitting in the chair and he's asking me, okay, what are you doing? What are your plans? Where are you going? And he kept me on track. Right. So when I ended up I didn't end up in college. The plan was to be an engineer because that's the direction that he was kind of cultivating me towards. And when I went a little wayward and ended up working, it's like, well, Doc, I have a job. I'm making money. I'm a firefighter. He said, that's nice, right? But it's nice for a young man, right? But you're going to get older and then start falling off of ladders. So it's not the type of career that you want to stay in for a long time. It's a young man's job. You need to be doing something where you're using your mind and not your body. So go back to school, right? So I did my undergraduate work, and I'm excited because not only am I working and making money and supporting family, I got my undergraduate, go back to the dentist. Doc, not only am I working, but I also got my degree. He said, yeah, but that's an undergraduate degree. When are you going to get your terminal degree? It's like, okay, back to school. I go back to school, I get my law degree. And now I'm finding my dentist and I'm taking him out to lunch, right, to congratulate him or to thank him for all of the good work that he put in. And I get in, I'm like, I'm paying for this dinner. He's not going to have to pay for anything. We sit down, we have the meal. And when I'm waiting for the check to come so that I can pay for the bill. And I guess I'm in my early 30s, say, and I'm waiting for the check. And he's like, well, what are you waiting for? Right? So I'm waiting for the check because I'm going to pay the bill. He's like, I paid the bill when we walked through the door. Right.
Wow.
Okay.
What a neat man. Were you lucky?
Phenomenal.
So how did you get your interest in diving? When did that start to happen? I'm finally talking with people who can understand Sea Hunt and Don Knotts. Don Knotts did a movie, The Incredible Mr. Limpet. Yep.
And I saw that as a child where a man fell into the ocean at Coney Island and turned into a cartoon fish. And the idea was, wow, I can be a fish. Right? And that movie impacted me and it drew me to the ocean.
And so were you a diver as a hobby, vacation, while you were a lawyer and supporting a family? So diving was an avocation, not a vocation.
Correct.
Okay.
Right. I started diving in 87. Right? And I stumbled into diving while I was on vacation with my then wife. And, excuse me, long story short, right? I ended up getting certified, and then, of course, life got in the way, and it took me a couple of years to get back to diving. But once I got back in, I just never left. Right. It was and is home for me. That's where I live. Right?
And you traveled all over the world then as a scuba diving instructor. Are you now in a paid capacity?
Well, I traveled the world diving. I became an instructor or a dive professional in 2003, 2004. Right. And from that point forward, it was in a paid capacity. But I became an instructor because I saw an instructor doing it badly.
Okay.
Right. There was an older couple that was being certified, and the husband was taken to it very quickly, and the wife was having some challenges, and the very young dive instructor at the time just kind of dismissed her and put her off to the side. She's crying. She's like, I don't want to do this anymore. And I recognized that was kind of my niche, right? Removing the hurdles for people who may have some challenges and exposing them to the joy that is the ocean and diving.
Okay. And as you traveled the world diving, what were some of your favorite dive places and why?
I'm different, right? I enjoy clear, warm water, but I can enjoy murky, cold water as well. I will dive in a mud puddle if that's all I have access to, right? Uh, so I spent many years diving in the Northeast because I lived in Jersey, and there are some phenomenal wrecks that exist in the Northeast. But the diving can be a bit challenging. So they say if you can dive in the Northeast, you can dive anywhere in the world, right? I love diving the Northeast because of what it is that it provided. But then having an opportunity to dive up and down the East Coast and to dive Florida and the Caribbean is just warm, easy, and the visibility and the fish were phenomenal. Probably one of my best dives to date is still the backside of Molokini Crater and in Hawaii. Because I could drop down on a wall 90 feet, close my eyes, and just listen to the sound of whale song and know that they may be a mile away, but they sound like they're right next to you and they're speaking in a language, an intelligent language that we to date do not understand.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful listening to whale song.
So tell us about Diving with a Purpose. You're a member of the board.
Mm-hmm.
Its purpose is to restore our oceans and preserve our heritage. Mm-hmm. Describe how Diving with a Purpose is restoring our oceans.
Okay. I'm going to go back a half step.
Okay.
And tell you about Diving with the Purpose. And then the two branches really of Diving with the Purpose are the maritime survey archaeology work and the coral monitoring work. So we really focus on two separate areas. But Diving with the Purpose was founded around 2002, 2003, because there was a particular slave ship off the Florida Keys, the slave ship Guerrero. And there was a documentary that was being done in search of that slave ship. There was a book by Gail Swanson about that particular slave ship. There was a young lady named Brenda Lazendorf, who was the archaeologist in Biscayne National Park, where they believe the ship lay. So she was featured in that documentary that was being done. And to date, we still have yet to locate it. We are very close, but Diving with a Purpose was founded to locate that particular slave ship, right? Ken Stewart, who was the program coordinator, was the regional director of the National Association of Black Scuba Divers at the time. Karuna Everall, who was the person who did the documentary, reached out because she wanted to have some Black divers involved in the search for the slave ship. So during that process, Ken Stewart eventually meets Brenda Lazendorf, who's the lone archaeologist. She's indicating we have loads of culturally significant wrecks in the Florida Keys. We are attempting to locate this particular slave ship, but as divers, Vicki, you you can't dive alone. You have to have a buddy. Right. And she's indicating, I don't have a partner to dive with, so documenting all of these ships is problematic. Ken Stewart, excited about the possibility, communicates to her, well, can anybody do it? Brenda says, I can teach anybody who wants to learn. Okay, I think I may have a group of people who could, if you can train, we can figure this thing out. So he goes home, sends out an email or communication to a bunch of the NABS members and says, instead of just diving recreationally, why don't we dive for a purpose and find this particular slave ship? And Diving with a Purpose was born. Okay.
Well, that's interesting. Right. But you say you're close, but you haven't found the slave ship yet, right? To this day.
We have been working with our partners in the Biscayne National Park, the National Park Service Submerged Cultural Resource Center, because the ship potentially lay in two areas, either in Biscayne National Park or in the NOAA Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary. Right? So they're both governed by two different bodies. Right? So we work with the National Park Service and we work with NOAA, who both have archaeologists who are both looking for the same ship. So National Park is looking in their area, NOAA is looking in their area, and the area that everyone believes the ship has been almost thoroughly documented. There is one area that exists within the national park area that hasn't been completely documented, and we're in the process of documenting with the national park, documenting that area to potentially remove any possibility that the ship lay in that area. Once that area has been fully documented, then by a preponderance of the evidence from investigations that have taken place since 2003, 2004, someone will be able to say, yes, we have located the slave ship Guerrero, but they can't make a statement until every possibility has been removed by documenting that last remaining area. So yes, we're very, very close.
Great. Now tell us about how you are helping to restore our oceans.
The ethos of Diving with a Purpose is, yes, preserving our culture and restoring our oceans. And for the first couple of years, Diving with a Purpose worked very closely with the Coral Restoration Foundation, right, which exists in the Florida Keys. They have probably the world's largest coral nursery.
Wow.
Where they grow fragments of coral in a nursery underwater, right, on coral trees that they construct. And over the course of a year or 9 months to a year, one coral fragment can turn into a huge coral thicket, right? And then those thickets are fragmented and then outplanted back out onto the reef. So Diving with a Purpose has engaged in that work with the Coral Restoration Foundation since 2014. And we've adopted a couple of trees, put in hundreds of hours of volunteer hours to work with the CRF, and outplanted thousands of coral fragments in an attempt to repopulate the Florida reef tract that was decimated, right, through a disease that came through and killed killed off just about all of the long spiny urchins that existed in the Florida reef tract and into the Caribbean. Those long spiny urchins that people tended to hate, right, because they would get stuck by them and poisoned and it hurts, right, were responsible for grazing the ocean and eating the algae.
Wow.
So it maintained that delicate balance to the ecosystem by removing that one organism, the long spiny urchin, right, algae proliferated, right, and it drowned out over 90% of the hard coral that existed along the Florida reef tract and down into the Caribbean. Right.
Now, how do you protect that, what you are growing, so that it is not destroyed by boats or by whatever man endangers that area that you're growing, that coral? How do you protect it?
That is a challenging proposition.
I bet.
Because in the area where the nursery exists, right, is a sanctuary. Right? So boats can operate in the sanctuary, but they have to moor and not anchor. If they're anchoring, they have to anchor in the sand. Right. So there is legislation or rules that are put in place to protect the marine ecosystem. That's one. Right. That says and does nothing for the environmental impact of the human impact to the ecosystem, right? All of the dumping that occurs, the disregard for the ocean, the overfishing that occurs. That delicately balanced ecosystem has been able to handle a gradual increase in temperature, has been able to handle some of the wrecking events that deposit ships and garbage. It has been able to handle even when we dump poisons in the ocean. It will eventually, right, when one or two things happen, the ocean or the planet will have a means of correcting itself. But what we are doing right now, by dumping 7 million tons of plastics and garbage in the ocean, by wrecking the corals with anchors, by heating the planet, right, and heating the waters, causing global warming and causing coral bleaching, because corals can't move, right, to cooler waters when the temperature gets too hot. They end up bleaching. By us pumping carbon dioxide into the atmosphere and causing ocean acidification, because part of the ocean's job, right, is to absorb CO2. It feeds off of it, right? But we're pumping so much CO2 into the atmosphere that the ocean can't absorb all of the CO2 that we're pumping in.
Wow.
So all of the things that are going on, right, are causing the massive decline. So it's not just one thing that we need to do. It's a systematic approach of, everyone says, right, when you find yourself, if you've dug yourself into a hole, right, that you can't get out of, the first thing that you have to do is stop digging, right? So we need to stop dumping tons of debris into the ocean on an annual basis. We need to remove some of the debris that we've dumped out. We need to outplant more coral, right? Because coral actually represents less than 1% of the ocean bottom right now, but it's responsible for 70% of the oxygen production on the planet. So we're killing coral through human impact, right? And the coral are responsible for the oxygen in the air that we breathe.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yes, right.
Wow.
Most people believe the majority of the oxygen that gets developed is developed from trees, right? That's about 25% of the oxygen production on the planet. That other 75% happens in the ocean.
Wow, that's interesting. You know, it's interesting as sailors, you know, when you drop anchor, and we sail the Caribbean, and there's all these these areas telling you where you should not drop your anchor because of preserving coral in the area. And boy, I'll tell you, if you happen to be in that area and you drop, you are chastised like you can't, embarrassed like you can't believe it. So I have a question now about training young divers between the ages of 16 and 23 with diverse backgrounds.
Vicki,
Yep.
One more thing before you go into your question.
Okay.
Right. Not only do we have to preserve the coral that currently exists, right? We have to multiply the amount of coral that's in the ocean to help to begin to solve the problem. So we need to create, right, coral paradises, right? Where right now there are barren fields and fields of rubble and fields of algae, right? And that's what we can do as humans to impact, to reverse the impact of what it is that we've been engaged in. But I'm sorry, go ahead.
Now, coral, I know coral, and there's brain coral too, right?
Yeah. Brain coral is a hard coral. The coral I'm referring to are the hard corals.
Okay.
And yes, brain coral is one of those hard coral species. There are many hard coral species that exist, that are responsible for creating oxygen. That's
amazing. That is absolutely amazing. I didn't know that. I learned something today. That's why we have these things. So now, Diving with a Purpose partners with the National Park Service in Biscayne National Park, Florida. And you have trained young divers between the ages of 16 and 23. Tell us about the program and the role you play helping young divers learn about mapping skills and searching for the slave ship that have been wrecked.
Okay, you have some very, very heavy, heavily weighted questions, right? But diving with a purpose, right? Started with adults doing or being trained to do monitoring, site surveys, right? To find wreck sites and document the wreck sites in place.
Right.
Ken Stewart, the program coordinator, prior to Diving with a Purpose being developed, was also the founder of an organization called the Tennessee Aquatic Project. He's been working with children for the past 3 decades. That's part of his passion. So after having created Diving with a Purpose, right, he looked at the work that the adults were doing and said to himself, I believe kids can do this work also. And as they are our future, but let's see if we can engage them in the work of citizen science and wreck site documentation. So he brought a couple of youth to the adult Diving with a Purpose program, and true to what it is that he believed, they did a phenomenal job in documenting those wrecks. However, when they were out of the water, there was no real dialogue or communication was going on between youth and adults. So he came up with the idea of establishing a youth Diving with a Purpose, where youth could get in absent all of the old people and old people conversations, to engage with them and to train them in STEM projects, right? And to get them to appreciate culture, history, and environment. So the adult program would happen in May or June of the year, and then he would set up a separate time in July after kids were out of school to come to bring them to Florida and train them as youth advocates.
And how many have gone through this program? Do you know?
A couple of 100 kids have gone through the program since its inception. I want to say in 2009. Typically, we take between 14 and 16 youth at a time, because we have to have chaperones and mentors and take care of all of the transportation issues to get them to Florida and to move them around and to make sure that they're all well taken care of. They're up at 6 o'clock in the morning doing yoga, breakfast, and then it's a full day of class and training, right? And then after training, then they do breakout sessions in the evening where they're learning people skills and just about everything that Ken can come up with to teach them about life.
That's phenomenal. That's really great.
Yeah, he's a phenomenal guy.
It has to be really rewarding. I mean, to see that and their excitement, of learning.
And since it's been going on since about 2009, 2010, we've had a number of children who've graduated from the program, gone on, gotten their degrees in different fields of study, and have actually come back to chaperone and mentor other youth. Right.
That's terrific. That's really great.
So I just played a small part in helping to guide the program as a lead instructor, but the fundamentals of the program were already in place when I joined. Ken had already done all of the heavy lifting. It was just coming in to do some of the instructional piece. But then part of being a lead instructor is teaching other instructors. So I've kind of taken a step back because we've developed a number of other instructors and lead instructors for the program so that I could be replaced and bring in new, fresh blood to take over the program. Right now, we have a phenomenal young man, Ernie Franklin, who's taken over pretty much all of the Youth Diving with Purpose program along with Ken Stewart.
That's
so phenomenal. I work separately with the CARES program on either the first or the second week of the programs, because that
describe
is
the
my
CARES
hope.
program.
CARES, like I said, originally started working with the Coral Restoration Foundation, just going down and doing maintenance in the nurseries and helping to do outplanting. Right. From there, we did some work with the Nature Conservancy also as a larger global organization. And there's a young man, Kemet Amons, who was an instructor with the Nature Conservancy, who didn't just deal with the 2 or 3 hard corals that the Coral Restoration Foundation was working on, the staghorn and elkhorn corals, which are probably the most resilient and the fastest growing of the corals, which is why they end up being the focus of most nursery outplanting work. Kemet was doing coral monitoring along with doing coral nursery and outplanting work. So for the first 2 or 3 years, we're working with the Coral Restoration Foundation. All we know that exists in the ocean are staghorn and elkhorn corals, the acropora species, right? And nothing else, right? But like you just mentioned, there are brain corals, right? There are flower corals, there are plated corals. So we're in the water with Kemet. Kemet is pointing out species after species after species. And I'm like, no, there's only staghorn and elkhorn coral. No, Kramer. There's a lot more down there than this. So he started doing survey work, and I was like, wow, there is so much more to be learned and so much more that needs to be understood about the delicate balance of the coral ecosystem. And that's how CARES was developed. DWP CARES, a collective approach to restoring our ecosystem, is basically a coral monitoring program where we teach the participants to do coral monitoring to assess the human impact to the coral ecosystem. So we do fish counts, we do invertebrate counts, and we do substrate counts to see what the condition of the hard corals are, what the condition of the invertebrates are, what the conditions and counts of the fish are, because all of those things go into what forms the health of a coral ecosystem. Wow. So by assessing the health of the ecosystem, we can assess the health of the ecosystem by identifying these particular species that exist in that ecosystem. And that is what we are teaching our participants as far as the CARES program is concerned, along with, while we're doing our surveys, removing debris from the ocean when you see it.
Wow.
Right.
I'm going to jump in here. Kramer, there's several questions that come up. When you talk about documenting an area, is that what you were just talking about? And what I want to understand is, what does that entail? When you say we go in and document an area?
All right. To citizen science is what it is that we're engaged in, both in the archaeological side and on the coral ecosystem side. So on the archaeological side, we go down to the site of a wreck, not knowing what that wreck is. Some archaeologist has a question that he wants answered. He or she wants answered to be able to identify a particular wreck. Once the question comes up, then we go down with the archaeologist as the principal investigator to try to identify what wreck that is. So the first thing that's done is a baseline is laid, which is it's not an invisible line. There's a line that goes through the center of the wreck, right, to parse it into left and a right-hand side, basically. And then we document every point of interest that exists in that area. Once the baseline is laid, then it's measured out in increments, either in meters or in feet, from 0 to whatever the length of the wreck is, because we're going from before the wreck to beyond the wreck to make sure we've covered all of the area. Right? So once the baseline is laid through the center, right, and then from the 0 point to the end point is measured out in equal segments, say 2 meters, 5 meters, 10 meters, 10 feet, 20 feet, whatever it is that they've determined the measurement is going to be based on the size and scope of the wreck. Then we are able to determine exactly where everything is in terms of the origin point that we take a GPS coordinate of, right? And from the origin point to the end point. So now linearly, we can tell you where the wreck is. And then we do measurements from points on the baseline to an individual point of interest, right? Which hasn't been identified as an artifact yet, but a point of interest that may be an artifact. And then from that artifact to another point on the baseline, which creates a triangle, right? And it's called Trilateration Method. So from 2 points on the baseline to a point on the artifact, now we can locate that particular point of interest in the ocean because we have the GPS coordinates, we have the points on the baseline. Mm-hmm. So even when all of those things are removed, we can go back and find the individual.
Wow, that's amazing.
That is amazing.
So that's part of the documentation process is trilateration mapping so that we can locate the particular point of interest. Once it's been located, then our divers also go into the water and they sketch that artifact to scale in place so that now the principal investigator has all of the potential artifacts drawn to scale and knows exactly where those artifacts are. And it all goes on a huge site map so that they can look at it and say, I think I know what this particular wreck is because we have a site map of all of the points of interest and we have a documentation of them drawn to scale laid out. So that's documenting as far as the archaeology portion is concerned.
You are an educator. and it shows.
On the ecosystem side, we do roving surveys and point surveys of random surveys of the coral reef. So we will lay down a transect line along the reef. Right? Once we've laid down the transect, 100-meter transect, right, we will wait for the area to settle back down, right, and then we'll run from 0 to 100 doing a fish count to count all of the fish that are associated with a healthy ecosystem to see if they exist in that area. After we've done the fish count, we'll wait, come back along that 100-meter transect and do an invertebrate count to see, are there lobsters there? Are there crabs there? Are there shrimp there? Are there spiny urchins there? Are there pencil urchins there? Are there trident trumpets there? Are the invertebrates that indicate a healthy ecosystem? So we're counting those as well. And then we go back, right, and assess what does the substrate or the ocean floor, what does it look like? Is it sand? Is it silt? Is it coral? Is it dead coral? Right? Is it algae? Because those are indicative also of a healthy ecosystem. So we take all of that data, and then that gets uploaded into an international database that says, okay, this is what this particular reef looked like at this particular point in time. And we do that on a quarterly basis for a number of different areas, in areas of high human impact and in areas of low human impact, and in areas that are controlled by a marine park area that limits what human impact can be, and outside of the area of what is controlled, to collect that data. And that data collection is taking place over the course of a 5-year period.
So now what you're describing is very time consuming, labor intensive. You can only be down for whatever period of time before you have to resurface to get either new tanks. My question is funding. How are you funded? How is all of this great work funded? Where does it come from?
All of just about 100% of our funding comes through donations, right? People who see the work that we're doing, and want to help. Help the next generation, or who want to engage in the work, right, to make a difference.
Do you have grants? Are grants in place to help you as well?
We have had some. We were lucky enough to get a small grant last year, right? But it's not consistent, and that helped with maybe 15-20% of the work last year. But to train a participant, right, cost approximately $2,500.
Yeah, that's what I was
Right.
thinking. Your training alone has to be. So are you what designation are you? Are you a charity? I mean,
we're a nonprofit. Yes.
You are a nonprofit.
Yes. Right. We're
so
501.
you can write grants. Do you have
Yes.
someone either volunteer on a staff to do your grant writing?
No. We've been struggling through trying to figure out how to make that happen. But then there was like the grant that we got help with last year. There were so many requirements associated with the grant and getting it completed and the reporting afterward.
Yeah.
It became almost too labor intensive, right? Or worth for what it is that we got.
We know that route. We know that. So is there a consortium of other organizations? I mean, like when Vicki mentioned earlier about the gentleman doing the river, cleaning rivers. Is there a consortium of organizations doing similar work? And I know the one, what's the one with the, I forget the name of it. It's the
Coral Restoration Foundation.
Pardon me?
The Coral Restoration Foundation, the Nature Conservancy.
Yeah.
Right. There are we do not have a dearth of organizations who are working in their particular areas getting things done. What we don't have is a massive coordinated effort, right? So everyone is doing little things in silos. I think NOAA has probably been one of the largest organizations to work and fund work to get things done. And we're working with NOAA, they're wonderful partners to get things done. They've been extremely helpful on the coral side and on the archaeological side. The Biscayne National Park, the Submerged Cultural Resource Center, has been very generous in supporting our youth Diving with a Purpose program. They've had been providing funding for a number of years that covered almost 25% of bringing the kids down and getting the work done.
Now, have you? Has anyone in your organization done a TED Talk or been invited to speak to organizations, corporations, and stuff about what you're doing?
No.
For a fee?
Not yet, not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
We do presentations to community groups, and part of the youth program, it's a requirement for them, right, to conduct presentations back in their local areas to the 4C clubs and Boys and Girl Scouts and their schools, to teach them about what it is that they've been engaged in. And they have to do two presentations a year just to maintain their space in the program.
Now, Diving with a Purpose has been recognized by CNN Champions for Change. Mm-hmm. I believe you're one of the 10 that's up for that award, monetary award, correct, for this year?
I am still unaware.
Okay.
Right.
And so Frederica Whitfield interviewed you about the coral that is dying in the ecosystem. Mm-hmm. Tell us about that interview. And it aired on CNN.
Yes.
It's airing repeatedly on CNN. Is that helping you with donations?
I don't know.
Okay.
right? It aired on CNN twice. I don't think it's aired again since then.
Okay.
Right? But she allowed Frederica, I'm sorry, gave us an international platform to tell the story of the work that we're doing on the coral ecosystem, right? Whether or not it's turned into whether the program, right, and the avenue that she provided us with has translated into monetary funds coming into the program of that, I don't know.
How would I find that out for you? Would that be talking to Ken?
Probably.
Okay, I'm going to do that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's, I actually had a question that might be the same answer. We have several members who are very interested and they're very involved in the whole intergenerational aspect of this. And I mean, right now they're doing an intergenerational garden in Philadelphia, and then looking at how they can move into other areas that need that kind of support. But this is an area with young people who are so interested in this, but don't have a clue where to begin. Would it be Ken and that Tennessee project? Or who would we have our people get in touch with if they're very interested in that whole intergenerational movement and what you're already
That's
doing?
a big area.
Ken Stewart is the guy, right? I do the work, right?
Okay.
My passion is in the water, right? Trying to make a difference. My passion is working with youth and adults, but mostly youth, because they get it, right? You can explain to them that it's tomorrow, but it's really today, right? The importance of it. We're at the point when we had to modify this year's program because of the circle of fire in the Gulf. So we spent half a day engaged in dialogue with youth who are watching the ocean literally burn, right? And saying, it's unfortunate, but this is on you, right? Ken has a saying, right, that he co-opted from Einstein. The problems that we face will not be solved by the minds that created it. And we teach that to the kids. It's a heavy burden, right? That this generation has placed on you, but they're not going to solve it. So we need all of your ingenuity, your passion, right, to help us make a difference.
Do we know how to can you put us in touch with Ken Stewart?
Ken Stewart is on the call.
Well, I saw that he was, but I have a feeling
but yes,
he might be taking it. Or...
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I have all of his contact information.
Yeah. I have now, I want to go back to just focusing on Kramer right now. And I'd like you to tell me about your purpose, where you are now, because you said your purpose has morphed in your life. And tell us about that morphing purpose.
I started working with Diving with Purpose because I felt the connection of trying to be able to do good, i.e. tell the story for people whose voices were removed from history, right? And no one ever did anything about it. So the idea of being able to engage and give peace to the families of people who were butchered during the transatlantic slave trade, right? To recognize that there are massive graveyards that exist that haven't been addressed or dealt with, right? And to give voice to that became a passion of mine, as it did with pretty much every member of Diving with a Purpose, irrespective of race. When when I started working with CARES, right, the archaeological piece didn't lose any of its passion for me, but the idea that if we don't address the issue of the coral ecosystem being responsible for 75% of the oxygen production on the planet, nothing else matters. Nothing, right? There are people who hate from one side of the globe to the other, right? There are people who are making money. There are people who are just doing all kinds. None of that is going to matter if we can't breathe. So I don't understand why everyone, every country doesn't stop everything that it's doing to fix this problem, right? Because it's imminent. I had an opportunity to listen to one world leader, Mia Mottley, the Prime Minister of Barbados, right, was standing in front of the UN, right, saying the Caribbean is on the cutting edge of this problem. Right? And it's not just our problem, she said. She said, if we don't do something right now, you're looking at millions of climate change refugees in the next decade.
Wow, that's very true.
Process that.
Yeah.
Right? And she's standing in front of the UN, the world's global body. Right? And people are looking like, oh, okay.
That's happening now.
It's happening now.
It's happening now.
Right. I was lucky enough to be engaged in the UN panel on remembrance of the transatlantic slave trade over the course from March through August. Right. And each month we had dialogue about different elements associated with the enslaved documentary that came out a year and a half ago, which is really, really important work and really important dialogue as far as education is concerned. But nothing else matters if we can't breathe.
Now, they burned the fires in South America.
Mm-hmm.
And they talked about the impact that has on our whole ecosystem, mm-hmm. and how we're just destroying ourselves. You know, man is destroying this planet. And I had no idea until man isn't destroying the planet, right? The planet will survive. The planet will keep on spinning, right? We will not be here. Yeah. Right. But go ahead. Anyway, Joyce, did you know that about the oceans? I had no idea about how it helps us in our breathing.
No, I had no idea. I mean, I had a whole series.
And I wonder how many other people are like me, and I live in the water when we go on vacation. I mean, I can't believe I didn't know that.
The vast majority of people.
That's true. I'm sure that's true. And when you said about the 75% oxygen, mm-hmm. Are there, forget articles, are there books, are there places where this is documented, written, and people just aren't reading it? Or is this not something that's even made known to the public?
That is typically the refrain that I get when I engage in dialogue. I said, don't believe me. You can go to Google, right? Just ask Google where oxygen production happens. Right? And they say, oh, you're right. And that takes nothing away from the devastation that's going on in South America right now, in Brazil with the rainforest.
Yep.
That's a crime.
That is.
Right? That they're allowed to burn down what essentially is 25% of oxygen production on the planet. That's no small feat.
Let me ask this question. Is there an association of organizations like Diving with a Purpose, Land, where all these organizations that are doing good for the environment, our climate, where you meet and have speakers, sessions annually about where we are, what's happening, what you can do to bring in audiences to be able to understand more. I mean, everybody talking about climate change, climate change, climate change. Well, you're sitting here saying this is one of the biggest areas where climate change is being impacted.
Mhm.
So as you're taking and, creating coral and creating the growth and being able to transplant it and be able to restore, are there other areas in the United States doing the same thing that are getting it from diving with a purpose?
I don't know.
Okay.
All right. Scientists do very good talking to other scientists.
Yes.
Politicians do very well talking about or debating with other politicians. Sometimes politicians
And pissing us off.
Yes. Sometimes politicians engage scientists to get information and either do or do nothing with it.
Right.
And sometimes there are organizations, non-governmental organizations, who engage in efforts that what you're talking about, I don't think is happening on any large scale, which is what I believe
is needed. Absolutely.
We need all force needs to be brought to bear, right? And with all humility, right? Everyone who has something, some voice, some idea, right, should be brought to the table to figure out how to fix this. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I have my ideas, right? And mine are from the mind of an old diver / used to be wannabe engineer, right? About how to problem solve for this. And it seems simple to me, is to increase coral production, right? Or coral coverage.
So now tell me, Kramer, as I'm looking at the hour, and I know you've taken a red eye, tell me what do you do for a living? I mean, is this your total living, diving with a purpose?
Yes.
It is.
I'm a former general contractor, former firefighter, former attorney, right? Really former dive instructor, because this is it.
This is your purpose.
Yes.
This is your passion.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes. And it's Ken Stewart's fault.
Somebody always drags us into something.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And he's done a great job. And now this word needs to get out.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people need to know this. And
Yes.
So as I bring this to a close, what's the best way for people to help diving with a purpose and get involved?
Two things, right? I am always open to having additional bodies, right? Because the work that we're engaged in requires a massive effort, right? So anyone who wants to come and be trained in order to do the work, either archaeologically or as far as the ecosystem is concerned, we can make that happen, right? We are, as a nonprofit, right, and for the vast majority of DWP participants and leadership do it as volunteers, right? Some of them are still working primary jobs, and some of them are like me, retired. And they donate hundreds or thousands of hours per year to the program. So we desperately need funding in order to train more people and to be more effective in the work that we do. Because yes, moving people around costs money. Diving and dive boats cost money. Doing the work costs money. The material costs money. So we're limited in the effect or the impact that we can have is all based off of funding and natural resources.
Now, diving with a purpose focus individuals are primarily Black, correct? Explain that.
Diving with a purpose started with predominantly the members of the National Association of Black Scuba Divers.
Right.
The National Association of Black Scuba Divers was not and is not exclusively an African American organization. Right. We have people from all around the world, right, that are members of NABs, and we have people from every color spectrum that are members of Diving with a Purpose.
And are there membership dues?
No.
No.
And located where? Does it have a geographic location?
Ken's in
Kent's in Nashville, Tennessee.
Okay, he's in Nashville.
Right.
So is that the seat or the headquarters?
That is the seat of Diving with a Purpose.
Okay.
Right? The majority of the work that we do has been in the Florida Keys, though we do work, and our work has expanded to include South Africa, Mozambique, the Great Lakes, up and down the Northeast corridor.
Okay.
And wherever it is that, as far as archaeology is concerned, wherever it is a principal investigator says, hey, can you help us out, document this wreck? We're on a plane, on a boat, or in a van to go and do that, right? As far as the ecosystem is concerned, right, we do work in Costa Rica, we do work in the Caribbean, we'll do work anywhere we're permitted to engage in citizen science to try and fix the problem.
Got it. Kramer, there's a Pablo Picasso quote of which you are the epitome of, and it goes like this: the meaning of life is to find your gift, and you found multiple gifts, and the purpose of life is to give it away. You're doing that now in so many fashions, and we are so fortunate, A, to meet you, and B, to have this hopefully be the beginning of a number of ways that we can work together in the future.
Thank you so much, Joyce. I appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.